Hi, everyone. You're watching act.tv. I'm Julianna Forlano. Yesterday, the World Economic Forum published a survey of nearly 350 risk professionals, which found that most were concerned about a prolonged global recession, and more than half said bankruptcies and industry consolidation was highest on the list. Here to give us a closer look at the economic fallout to come and what we can do to fight for the most vulnerable in our communities, which now includes everyone, is Professor Richard Wolff. Professor Wolff is a Marxian economist, well known for his work on Marxian economics, economic methodology, and class analysis. He is the host of Economic Update with Richard Wolff, which is syndicated on over 70 radio stations nationwide. It's on YouTube and it's available for broadcast also on Free Speech TV. If you don't know about Free Speech TV, it's amazing. That's, you could get a real entire college education just by watching it a few hours a day. Professor Wolff, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here, Juliana. Really, I'm glad to be here.
Well, where do we start? The airlines, we can start there, I guess, are one industry that's been slammed by this pandemic. All non-essential travel is banned to curb the spread of the disease. Experts and analysts think it will take 5 years for the industry to recover, and that some airlines are not going to survive. What are you most concerned about in terms of the economic fallout from this crisis as it affects our economy?
Well, I think we have to begin by facing something which a lot of people seem to want to shy away from. We're not facing a depression. We are in a depression. It's not something that may come. It's already here. When you have unemployment in the United States at 30 or more million people added over the last 4 or 5 weeks, you are in unprecedented territory. We've only had that kind of a situation once or twice or maybe 3 times in the history of capitalism, which is several centuries old now. The worst still is the 1930s, but we are in a position to catch up. We're already number 2 after the 1930s. It's a disaster. There is no way out of pretending. Absolutely, the airlines are going to be affected, but everything is. A big depression affects every industry, mostly negatively, although there are a few industries that always make money during a depression, just like there are always a few industries that collapse in an upturn. That's the way capitalism is. It's a very uneven system, and it impacts different parts of the community differently. Airlines have been subsidized. Almost every airline in the world is subsidized by its government. It's really only a question of how big the subsidy or how it's arranged. Here in the United States, for example, the government pays the airlines a very big fee for handling airmail, the post office, for example, and it builds the airports and it maintains the airports and it gives the airlines the ability to borrow money at a lower price, all kinds of subsidies. And not all of this makes much sense. So you're going to see, that's right, fewer airlines, more consolidation, and they're going to find new ways to hit us with fees. Maybe we'll be charged to go to the bathroom in the airplane in a way that we didn't before. And maybe it'll
cost you $25 if you don't.
That's right. Otherwise, you just blow up at your seat or something like that.
They'll put bags there for more things than just the vomiting. Anyway. I still don't really understand why we have to bail out the airline industry. If no one is flying, I understand they had to furlough their workers, but couldn't we just give those workers directly the money and give them health care, and therefore the industry can just do what the industry needs to do? Why can't we do that, Professor Wolff?
Well, there is no answer to that because we can. I mean, it's not that we can't. We can do that.
But that's not a bad idea, right? That's a decent idea.
It's a super idea. I'll give you one that's even a little bit better. If we don't need the 700,000 people, that's the number given by the airline industry of people that work in that industry, flying the airplanes, flight attendants, all the people in the airport, the ground crew, all of that. All right, that's 700,000 people. Here's an idea. Suppose the government rehires them to do other things that are socially useful while the airplanes are not flying and the airports are empty. Hello, I could give you some examples. We have currently tested under 4% of the American people for the coronavirus. 96% of our fellow citizens are running around coughing on us, and we don't know whether they are sick or
Yeah,
not.
exactly.
Because many people with the virus don't have much in the way of symptoms. If we wanted to really open the country safely, we could make sure that everybody working doesn't have the disease. That would help us even better than masks and gloves and all the rest. So here's 700,000 airplane workers. They could be trained, takes about 2 hours, I'm told, how to administer the test. It's a very simple, quick test. And we could then make a real gain on this virus for the safety of all of us while giving these people a useful job, paying them a decent salary. That would be an infinitely better way to have 30 million people sitting there feeling bad about being unemployed, putting added pressure on a family already locked down in their apartment. This is nuts. We could be making much more use. And in case people are wondering, that's what we did in the 1930s. Roosevelt's New Deal hired 15 million Americans to build the national parks in the West, to do cultural programs all over the country. They found creative ways to make use of people, which is much better for the unemployed themselves and much better for the rest of us. So sure, we could do it. It's only the fear. Let me underline this. The fear of private employers. They don't want a government that's hiring millions of people because the government is under the pressure of us as voters to treat those workers well, to pay them, to give them proper benefits. And the private sector doesn't want that because those benefits could be better. And then when those workers go back into the private sector, they'll have demands and they don't want it. Otherwise, we'd have it.
The airline industry is particularly problematic in terms of a virus because everybody gets in a tube and breathes recirculated air. So
Right.
nobody wants to really go back to work, I could see, without a test. And then nobody wants to get on the plane without a test. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I know the right wing is concerned, or the right people on the right in the internet are concerned that all of this testing will then lead to, and maybe we're getting off the topics of economics here, that will lead to databases of collected information where you have to have a passport that says you're virus free, and there's going to be papers, and there, I could see this information in the wrong hands, like the hands of the administration that we have now, being used against the people. Do you have any thoughts about that? I know that's a little out of your wheelhouse.
No. I do. I understand that concern. And in this society, it'd be strange if you didn't have that concern. We do have to be worried about surveillance. We've seen what the NSA and other institutions of the government are prepared to do. All I can say is I would hate the fact to be that those agencies that threaten us now are going to deprive us of a tool that could save our lives. I would rather go, let's test everybody and let's put into existence the institutions, the laws, and the regulations that will make it very difficult and very dangerous to abuse this information. My family is partly French. In France, everybody carries an identity card. They do that from the moment they're born until the moment they die. It's a general identification. Does that risk being abused? Sure, it does. And so, what has happened in France, and it's not 100%, nothing is, but what has happened in France are a whole set of laws and institutions that are there for one reason: to supervise and monitor that the data on the identity card is not used for policing or espionage or any of those kinds of activities. And periodically they expose it. So the government official who abuses is nervous that he or she could be caught. And I think that's the best way to go. Otherwise, we allow the intrusion of our privacy to deny us protection from a disease that could kill us.
A comment that came into our stream chat on Twitch was that maybe the government could hire some people to fix the roads here in Michigan. That a way I wouldn't be worried my car will fall apart driving down the road. Funny comment, from Paul
Very
Person.
wise. Yeah, very wise. This person understands, what are we doing? I mean, this is one of the great critiques of capitalism, that it regularly has millions of people out of work who want a job, and millions of the rest of us who want very important things to be done in our society, like fixing the roads in Michigan, like testing people for corona, like doing the Green New Deal, all the things that make our society have a better climate, less global warming. I mean, we have lots of things we need to get done, and we have now millions of people who want a job, but we live in a system that can't put those two things together, which stands as a critique of capitalism as powerful as any other.
How long do you think President Trump is going to be able to stand behind, hey, the Wall Street is doing fine. It's rallying because they think there's a vaccine and everything's going to be fine. How long do you think this charade that he is living in is going to hold up so that the media can pretend everything's fine?
Well,
I mean, the media isn't showing the bread lines. They occasionally show, look how many cars are in the mall parking lot getting a box of food in some town, but very rarely. I mean, I'm watching New York One. You're from New York.
Right.
New York's like, everything's good. Look, these people are helping each other. You can't go to the beach, but maybe you can, but you can't. Anyway, we're still waiting. It's just it's not showing the lines of people waiting for food.
No, and that's because we have allowed as a society the overwhelming bulk of the mass media to be owned and operated by the biggest corporations in the country, and they share the same perspective that everybody else does. They either are Fox News, so they're cheerleaders for Trump, or they're big businesses, and while they have criticisms of Trump, they want the system to work. They are part of the system. They need the system. Capitalists are learning a painful lesson for themselves these days, that they're nothing unless they have workers. The machines they own don't make anything. The factories they own don't produce anything. The raw materials they've stockpiled just sit there gathering rust and dust. The one thing they can't do without, and the only thing that produces their profits, is workers working. And that's why they want the quote unquote country opened. And so they're going to support Mr. Trump in quote unquote opening the economy. I hate to be a downer, but I've got to say something which
we need a downer. I mean, New York One is like, it's fine once we open back up. Bang! It's going to just pop back to normal.
It is an extraordinary society that says to millions of its working class people, here's your choice. You either go back into an unsafe environment where you risk not only getting sick or dying yourself, but taking that virus infection home to the people nearest and dearest to you, your children, your elderly, your spouses, or you can go to work. Or you can refuse to go to work. That's your choice. You either go into an unsafe place, because remember, we haven't even tested 96% of our people. So you go into an unsafe place, or you are fired because your employer can now fire you if you don't come back with a quote unquote opened economy. You can then lose your job. You can then not have a job to go back to. And now with Mr. Trump, there's the threat that they will take away your unemployment insurance because you have refused to go back to work. In other words, we are forcing people. This is called in other countries forced labor, or maybe even slave labor. What kind of a society gives you that choice? We will either crush you into mind-numbing poverty where you won't even get an unemployment and compensation check, or you go to work and risk the lives of yourself and your family. This is a society that has broken down. It doesn't even honor the most basic notion of the respect of human life. It used to be popular to suggest that Americans value family or Americans value human life. Other societies don't. Well, we are the worst example of the degradation of respect for family life. And my fear is, and here's where I'm going to be harsh, employers know that when you have 30 million people unemployed, using up their savings, becoming a burden on their family if they beg for money from one another and all the rest, they know those people are desperate. So if a few of them come back and they get sick and they die, there's lots of other people ready to take the job. And so for them, it's a few lost workers easily replaced. For the rest of us, it's playing Russian roulette with our lives. It is a sign of a system that has come to the end, because that's when forced labor is necessary. I don't mean to be the downer, but not to see this is to be as blind as you just described the TV station that pretends everything is hunky-dory except you can't go to the beach yet.
How how can we message in a short, succinct way? You know, people I think are there's two messages out there. Oh, this is terrible. We're all going to die. Sit on your pile of money, whatever you got. And then there are people who are saying everything's fine the minute we open the doors. Just like Trump said, you're going to see this unleashment of funds and everything's going to be fine. Is there a way that's kind of succinct that we could message the reason that opening the economy again is not just going to have it bounce back to normal? Because that seems like, you know, if you're in low, you're not super into economics, just like, yeah, okay, once they open the doors, once this passes, everything will be fine. Why will it not be fine?
I think
It's
the only
not
way,
fine right now, but why will it not be fine as we open up?
because in the past, which is the only guide we have as to what might happen, depressions on this scale have lasted a long time. The last one is 1930s. Let me remind everyone, the economy crashed in October of 1929, and the official ending date of the Great Depression was 1941. So let's be clear, a major depression lasts a long time. This one is arguably worse because we have an economic crash, and on top of it, a disease that is genuinely terrifying and puts us all at risk. Therefore, the presumption is it will last longer and not be shorter than the other one. The second worst crash was in 2008. We all remember it. And it took 8 to 10 years to get the economy back to where it was when it crashed in the last 4 months of 2008. So the burden isn't on those of us who say we're just early into this horror. The burden is on those who would imagine that this is going to be quickly overcome. Depressions of this scale have never been quickly overcome. They didn't before. And let me threaten your consciousness, if I can, or provoke it with another. When the Great Depression looked like it was maybe over around 1936-37, which was already then 7 years old, it was misunderstood. They were wrong, the people who thought it was over, and it plunged down again. And the unemployment started going up again. And the only thing that got us out of that unemployment after 11 years of it was a war. And
That's what someone in our stream chat just said. A war. Do we want that? Yep.
Yeah, a war puts people back to work. Here's what happened in 1941. We got out of the depression of all the unemployment. You know why? We took half the unemployed people and put them in a uniform. And we took the other half of the unemployed people to make the uniforms and the guns for the uniformed people to use. The war overcame unemployment, which stands as another stark criticism of capitalism. It presents you with this choice: protracted unemployed, depressed economy, or war. And again, what kind of a system does that to you tells you a lot about whether or not you ought to be a loyalist of this kind of system, or say to yourself, as I do, I know we can do better than capitalism.
There's so many people talking about the vaccine right now. I had this thought while we were chatting that we could call a strong social safety net the vaccine against the depression. That would be some good
It's also,
marketing.
yeah, putting those people to work in this country. Look, the 30 million people, not only could they finally test everyone in America, which would make us all much safer, but they could refigure the factories, the offices, and the stores. So we have social distancing. They could do all the kinds of cleaning and disinfecting.
Oh, you froze a little bit. I'm going to stand here and hope that you come back. I hope your internet didn't fail you. We're speaking with Professor Richard Wolff. I don't know if you can hear me, Richard, but I cannot hear you. It's a little bit frozen. So, gee, I hope that's not the end. Riot Fox in our chat says they got him. I do see that you are making comments and questions in our in the Facebook chat, and I thank you for that. I will pass them forward if he does come back. Oh, are you back with us? Oh,
Yeah,
thank the Lord. I was just about to start crying. Look, we're not done.
No, we're not done. It's just that the internet in this area where I'm hunkered down is, how shall I put it, unstable is what
The people are supporting, the people are cheering now. They were worried that they got to you.
No, at least not yet. At least
We have
not.
some questions coming in from Silver. Do you think that the political elite and capitalist elite in America do want to see a war to fight the depression to further extract wealth from us and the world?
I don't so much think that they want it, but they certainly consider it as an option. And certainly the people around Mr. Trump are acutely aware that as we get closer to the election, and as it may be looking really bad, let's remember, this is the incumbent president who sits on top of the worst failure in protecting public health in American history and a collapsed economy. Not exactly what you want, especially if you've been boasting about the economy.
Yeah, exactly. If that's your thing.
Right.
You're a businessman. You know, I mean, he tanked everything he's ever touched, so we're not too surprised that
So he may be tempted to have a big war and hope that people support him, as Americans often do in a war, at least in the early phases.
Oh God,
He will
I
be
think we're
tempted.
sick of war, so.
Yeah, and that will be his calculation. There will be no morality in it, and no genuine patriotism. There'll be a calculation. What helps me win this election? What minimizes my risk of loss? I'll go to war or not, just like he's been doing all along. He has Iran that he can go to war against. He has the Chinese he can go to war against.
Oh,
He can play these games. They're very dangerous, including for him, but that's what he does.
So back to our, and I, if you need to get a glass of water, I totally get it. We had so much pollen here in New York yesterday. It was absolutely
That's
unbelievable. Feel free.
What I have. I have allergies, and they get to me from time to time.
Yeah, yesterday was crazy with the wind and the chaos. It was when we started our interview, we discussed the World Economic Forum and how they're warning of the quote economic distress and social discontent. What does the social discontent part look like for the average family in the US and around the world?
Well, I think what you're seeing is, as capitalism, particularly in the West, in Europe, in North America, Japan. Let me put it this way. This is the third crash of capitalism in this new century. Let's be real clear. We had the so-called dot-com crash in the spring of 2000. We had the subprime mortgage crash in 2008. And now we have the coronavirus. 3 crashes in 20 years. You can blame the trigger, but the truth of it is, if the animal isn't so vulnerable, it doesn't get sick, this often. So we're in deep trouble. And the problem with capitalism is it has a big talk about unity, but it doesn't make for unity. We are more divided as a nation now than ever. And I don't just mean pro-Trump, anti-Trump, and all of that. I mean, we have, excuse me, we have a higher concentration of wealth in the hands of a smaller number of people and a greater distribution of economic difficulty. The Federal Reserve, even before the virus hit, did a study that showed that for most American families, an unexpected expense in the neighborhood of $1,000 would really throw them. They don't have $1,000. They would have to sell something they own of value to be able to cover an expense. I mean, that's an extraordinary kind of vulnerability. And my fear is, and that's the fear that the World Forum is talking about, as capitalism has difficulty, the people at the top have the greatest resources to push the burden of the difficulty onto others. And that's what they're doing. Wealthy people are in the stock market. They're doing okay. The rest of us are unemployed.
Right. Is it possible that this kind of social discontent that was mentioned by the World Economic Forum could lead to widespread, even global protests and serious changes in our economic systems?
Yeah, you're already seeing it. That's what, I mean, in a way, sorry about this. It really is just allergies.
That's okay. That's okay. We'll let you go after this one, but we want to leave on a note of hope.
Everywhere there is this falling apart. The middle of the political spectrum is disintegrating, and people are going to the left or the right in protest against normalcy. So when Trump says we're going to get the country back to normal, this is idiotic beyond even his normal, because the normal is what got us here. So to get back to the normal is real stupid, but put that aside. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, or it may have been 2 days ago, a part of the government of the French President Macron quit his government, quit his party. They were left-wingers within his support. They are angry that he hasn't done more about environmental problems, and he hasn't done more for social justice issues, by which they mean the distribution of wealth and income in France. So yes, they were middle of the roaders, but they were tilting a little left, and they can't stand Mr. Macron, which is a widespread feeling in France, and so they quit. I think you're seeing large and small disintegrations of the middle everywhere. And I think you're going to see protests of all kinds. We are in for a very bumpy ride, and it's more important than ever that people who understand what's going on and see what needs to be changed get involved. The positive note, I see that happening. I see it happening all around me, all around the United States.
In fact, we're about to have two guests on from Indivisible who have been leading really artistically fabulous protests, against those people who are insisting that we open the economy, even though it's dangerous.
Right.
We've been speaking with Professor Richard Wolff. Richard, please watch Richard Wolff's program on YouTube, Economic Update. It is out every week, and it's an entire education, but also, keeps you up to date in a realistic way, things you're not going to hear on CNBC about what we are facing as a nation. Richard, I thank you so much for being a regular guest here on our program.
My pleasure, Juliana. And let me thank you for having a program that dares to do this and put this out there. It's more important now than ever.
Thank you so much. You're watching ACT TV. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and tell your friends about this channel. We bring you speakers, thought leaders, progressive movementarians about 10 times every week. Don't miss out. Thank you very much.